Yes, let's go across to Gabriel Noronha, former U.S. State Department advisor on Iran, is joining us. We've been discussing, Gabriel, just before you joined us, the links between Hamas and Iran, and of course the suspicion that Iran was actively participating in this attack, in its planning, possibly its execution as well. But I want to begin by asking you, how do you think the Hamas fighters, terrorists, and others managed to keep the Israeli intelligence in the dark and catch them so much by surprise? That's the first question swirling around in the minds of everyone today. Just how was this possible? What do you think?
So a lot of Israeli intelligence was very much focused on threats in different locations. They believed that Palestinians in the West Bank would be launching attacks. That's where there had been a lot of turmoil. The Gaza Strip had been relatively quiet. And so they were looking in all the wrong places. There were a small minority of people who thought that it was going to be Gaza. And then what ultimately the Hamas terrorists did is they took out observation posts. They took out the early monitoring sites first. That was the first thing that they attacked. And they did it with such overwhelming force that they weren't able to send out warning signals in time. Then they were able to breach the fences and then go slaughter whole towns on the other side of the wall.
Let me come to you, since you were the U.S. State Department advisor on Iran till as recently as 2021. What do you make of the suspicions that Iran was behind this attack?
Iran is certainly responsible for everything. The only question is whether they directly planned and executed this attack. Iran has supported Hamas since 1992. They give them about $100 million a year, which is a lot for Hamas. It's not a large organization. They trained 6,500 of their fighters. They provided rockets, ammunition, weapons, fundraising, operational support. So I think of Iran as kind of their parent. This is an organization that they normally approve of certain operations beforehand. And at the end of the day, Iran has been fomenting a lot of the anti-Israeli rhetoric for generations.
Yeah. The U.S. decision to give $6 billion to Iran or defreeze that aid to Iran just recently, or just a week before this attack was mounted, that has come under a lot of question. Do you think that was fundamentally the wrong decision to make?
Absolutely, it was. And it gave Iran and Hamas the certainty that they would have financial backing through the war. Now, the $6 billion doesn't go directly to this war, but it's sort of like if you put $6 billion in your savings account, you're able to draw out of your checkings account or draw out of your credit cards. Iran's currency markets were really unstable until they got the $6 billion. This provided them the stability needed to execute this war. Now there's a large debate in the United States about whether that $6 billion should be frozen again.
Yes.
Almost every Republican lawmaker is in favor of it, and now Democrat lawmakers as well are calling for this money to be frozen. And I think the White House is now actually considering whether they will do so.
No, that was going to be my next question to you. The pressure that is mounting on Joe Biden with the sheer, just the timing of the aid being released and then this attack being planned has been pretty embarrassing. Now, U.S. being a steadfast supporter of Israel, do you think that they will be able to make that decision to defreeze this aid? And also, many are questioning whether this aid in exchange or in lieu of freeing 5 American prisoners was necessary in the first place.
So I'll address the second question first. It was not necessary to be given to Iran.
Right.
I negotiated 2 hostage deals during the Trump administration with Iran. We were able to get Americans out for just simple one-for-one prisoner exchanges. And what happened in this deal was it was 5 Americans released for 5 Iranians released. And then on top of that, there was the $6 billion given. That was just poor negotiating by the administration. There's nothing else to it. So this money is sitting in banks in Qatar. It has not yet been dispersed, and each dispersal is supposed to be approved by the U.S. government in advance. The good thing is we can now review these withdrawals indefinitely. And certainly as long as this war is going on and as long as Israel is supporting Hamas with financial and military aid, that's exactly what should happen.
I wanted to understand this, and for the benefit of our viewers, what exactly needs to take place? What are the processes for, the U.S. Congress and others to be able to defreeze this aid?
So they're very complicated legislative tools that they can do, but they can force the Treasury Department to basically suspend sanctions relief. Normally, these providing money to Iran is a violation of U.S. sanctions, and banks never want to be doing any of that. And so the what's happening here is that the Treasury Department gave a blanket waiver and said, we will not sanction you if you do these kinds of things. Congress can go and rescind those assurances to banks, and then those banks will have zero interest in facilitating the cash transfers.
Can you just elaborate a little bit more on just why you think the Biden administration did this? Because, you've had many part of the administration, even till yesterday, talking about the concerns over Iran. The history is known to everybody. The suspicions were always there. They know what Iran does in funding and aiding Hamas. So why was this decision taken in the first place, you think?
Look, it was led by, there was a group in government that was very sympathetic to Iran. And now it's actually come out that many of them were reporting directly to Iran, and now they're under FBI investigation here in the United States. Some of the people involved were actually reporting directly to the Iranian Foreign Ministry asking for permission. So this is a massive intelligence failure in the United States. There appears to have been either an espionage ring or an influence ring. And those people were at the top levels of U.S. government advising and carrying out these decisions. There's a huge reckoning here in Congress on these issues, particularly because one of the alleged Iranian agents is actually working at the Pentagon still today with a
Wow.
very senior security clearance.
But what you're describing, Gabriel, is an extremely serious breach of propriety and processes and background checks.
Absolutely. Members of Congress are outraged. Actually, the leaders of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and the House Foreign Affairs Committee this morning sent a letter to Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State, demanding a full investigation of all these accounts and all these problems that we've been seeing here because the concerns are so deep. And that's why some of these people are under law investigation now. Iran has spent decades trying to infiltrate the United States, trying to influence it through think tanks. And they've actually been incredibly successful in the past 2 years. We just didn't realize how deep the problem went. Now the public and Congress is understanding, and they're asking a lot of questions.
In the final couple of minutes, Gabriel, I do want you to talk to our viewers a little bit about how you see some of the other Arab countries. We know their historical position, but some of the other Arab Muslim countries that have traditionally supported the Palestinian cause, how do you see them responding? Because every day there is concern that this war could expand in intensity and also in territory.
Absolutely. So after the Abraham Accords, Israel made peace with the UAE, with Sudan, with Bahrain, Morocco. What we've seen is those countries have had far more restrained responses. They haven't been attacking Israel as much. And what we've seen is countries that we were looking at making peace with Israel still have not said very positive things towards Israel. It's important to note that was the original goal, really, of these attacks by Hamas. The goal was to split the Arab countries from Israel again, make them more sympathetic to the Palestinian cause, and prevent the peace deals from going through. And it appears that they're being quite successful. In terms of regional escalation, that is something that concerns every nation in the region. The concern from Israel is that Hezbollah, which is in Lebanon to Israel's north, will enter this war and make this sort of a two-front war. Hezbollah is significantly larger and more capable than Hamas. They have the ability to destroy Israeli cities with their massive rocket and missile arsenal. Iran typically won't get involved in them directly, but what they do is they train, they arm, and they equip the terror proxies that go and attack Israel.
And do you see the U.S. stepping in directly if the war was to expand?
Well, we've already seen 14 Americans killed.
Yes.
There are 20 Americans missing. Some of those may be kidnapped. So we're on the edge there now. The question is simply, does Israel want us to be involved and in what manner?
Right.
They have their own military on the ground. They're very capable. So I think we are already going to be providing Israel with many weapons, Iron Dome interceptors to protect against rocket and missile attacks. I don't suspect that you're going to see U.S. military boots on the ground, but if the war expands, you could see some targeted operations by the United States.
And my final question, Gabriel, do you see that some of the sympathy to the Palestinian cause or the justification for even having a group like Hamas be elected and operate for the last couple of decades and more, do you think some of that sympathy to this cause has evaporated around the world because of the very brutal, barbaric nature of the attack that was also in some cases broadcasted not just to family members of the victims, but to the world at large, even though we are seeing some pro-Palestine rallies break out in different continents with some very questionable language, slogans and posters. But do you still feel that as far as country to country relationship is concerned or larger groups are concerned, this would evaporate that sympathy that it had?
Absolutely. I think what you're seeing, certainly in the United States, is people who don't normally pay attention to Israel-Palestinian conflicts waking up and saying, this group looks a lot like ISIS. It looks a lot like Al-Qaeda. Their tactics of beheading, their tactics of burning their victims alive are really, again, barbaric. And so it's changing a lot. One thing that I think it's important to know is Hamas's goal here is to have Israel retaliate. They want to see images of buildings leveled in Gaza. They want to see the collateral damage. That's why Hamas uses human shields. They put their headquarters in hospitals and schools, and they are
Yes.
sort of hoping that Israel retaliates and destroys these things, and then they want to use the images of the bodies to gain sympathy. And that's simply something that people shouldn't fall for. It's the whole point of this. That's why they provoked Israel like this. And hopefully it doesn't work, because I think everyone in India remembers the terrorist attacks that have happened there.
Yes.
They understand there's a difference between attacking militaries and declaring a formal war. And there's a difference between that and targeting civilians, targeting women and children, and killing them violently.
Absolutely.
There's no moral equivalence there at all.
Absolutely. I'm glad you said that. And I hope that that tactic that the Hamas has employed, possibly successfully for several years, will have diminishing returns from here on. Certainly, we're seeing signs of that as that tactic becomes very obvious and transparent. Gabriel, thanks a lot for speaking to us. It was an absolute pleasure. We look forward to having you again on the show.
Thanks for having me.